What is going on, everybody? Happy Friday, 12 o'clock special time. We might be doing this every single week. We're going to kind of just see what the turnout is. But, most importantly, we want to welcome you in here on a Friday. I'm your host, Shad Dales, the latest Trade to Black podcast. Topics today and why you should watch this podcast will look no further than the state of Ohio. We've been saying impressive numbers in the month of August, which was around 44 million. Well, it's twofold for the month of September, over $87 million. Maybe not quite twofold, but you understand my math. But what an impressive start for this market in Ohio. Hirsh Jain from Ananda Strategy. He's actually in Ohio right now. He'll be joining us to talk about these latest numbers and some of the feedback he's hearing about this cannabis space as well. We'll tackle the elephant in the room. We're going to play Switzerland here because there's still a lot of information that we need to learn from both sides of what's going on related to the lawsuit, the defamation lawsuit that Trulieve filed earlier this week against the Florida Republican Party. Big news to say the least. And finally, some more information that we're going to have regarding the debate regarding Senator Joe Gruters and why we thought he won and won that unanimously in the debate earlier this week with Dr. Jessica Spencer. So with that, let's welcome in here on a Friday. Guap, good to see you, my friend. How are things?
Things are good. I'm excited to have Hirsh on. He's one of my favorites in the space. Anthony's taking a well-deserved Friday off, so I'm happy to be here and run through the headlines with Hirsh.
That's great. So with that, let's welcome in Hirsh Jain from Ananda Strategies back to the podcast. Good to see you. Happy Fridays. And don't hear too often people flying from LA to Ohio. But here you are, and you're doing it. What are you doing in Ohio, my friend?
Totally. Well, thanks for having me, guys. It's great to be here. I am here at the Ohio Cannabis Health and Business Summit. It's honestly incredible. It's at the International Exposition Center in Cleveland. There are 5,000 people here, really excited about adult use. Justin Bibb, the mayor of Cleveland, is walking the floor, and just to hear his comments about how professional a gathering this is really encouraging. There's a ton of brands and retailers and ancillary businesses here, so it's great. And, later this afternoon, I get to speak on a panel with Jamie Callender, who's one of the leading, Republican advocates for cannabis in Ohio, was a big reason this program was implemented in an expeditious way, serves as the head of JCAR, which is the rules committee that is putting out rules. So it's awesome. It's awesome to be here. I think there's a lot to be said about Ohio.
What's the mayor from Cleveland? Was he, make some announcements this morning? Like, what were some of the takeaways that how he's viewing the industry? And let's face it, you got a mayor of the biggest city or one of the biggest cities in the state backing it up. That's always a good thing, right?
I mean, it was honestly incredible. So Justin Bibb was walking the floor. He didn't make any formal announcements, but he knows Lenny Berry, the organizer of the conference, really well. They go back far. Justin Bibb, I found out, is the same age as me. And so it's incredible to have an American mayor of a huge city that's sort of on the younger side. And he was just commenting on the professionalism of the gathering, right? And how sophisticated the booths were and how intelligent the cannabis professionals here were. And look, he's pro-cannabis, but even he commented that this was different than what he was expecting. So it was amazing to see the mayor engaged in conversations about this policy with all the folks there.
Another example as to how much this industry is just so far from perception and reality. And I think that's always the feedback that you get from people that don't follow the space, that they're pleasantly surprised at how professional and how much the industry has changed versus people's perception of this whole 1969 hippie Woodstock type era, which is so far from the truth, right?
Totally. And I mean, to that point, Chad, tonight, the conference is taking over the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland. Really just think about that. This is one of the most iconic destinations in the city of Cleveland, and they're making it available to a large cannabis conference, which would have drawn huge eyebrows just a few years ago. So these are the small things that I think symbolically illustrate normalization, again, in a more conservative part of the country.
Isn't that something? We were in Washington a couple of weeks ago, and we actually ran into a producer from NBC that actually was working at the White House back in the 80s when Nancy Reagan was giving her speech out on the lawn for like the Just Say No era. And afterwards for entertainment, they had the Beach Boys there. And the whole band was smoking joints while she was making this announcement.
That's ironic.
So God bless the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. That'll be a great event, right?
Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. They've gone together for years, so it's no surprise here that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame would welcome you guys.
Yeah, that's great. Well, let's look at wanted to have you on because you're in Ohio, and what impressive numbers. This is only month number 2, and we're already at $87 million that the state just reported. 43.02 of that was actually towards adult use. But again, we've said before, this is a state that had no lead up time to help promote, this going live. but we are in only month 2. We've got $87 million already in the books. Like, what was your reaction when you read this stat? Were you expecting something like this?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way to think about Ohio is that the adult use market has doubled from the medical market, and then there's so much more room to grow, right?
Yeah.
So I think the top line takeaway is that Ohio used to be a $500 million market. Now it's $1 billion market, but still there's so much more room for growth in Ohio. And, I think it has the potential to be a $3 billion market. And so, as you mentioned, right, there was the $87 million figure. And, the way that they calculate sales in Ohio is still weird. They do it on a weekly basis. So there's a little bit of noise in that data, right? So it was like 44 million for August, but sales there started, August 6th.
Right.
And then gave us September numbers that go through the, through the 28th. So there's still a couple more days. But I mean, I think long story short, between the first 2 months, you had a total of 90 million in adult use sales, and medical is still a really big, part of that number. And sometimes that goes underreported, right? People will say, oh, 44 million in sales, but that was just the rec number, right? The medical number in many instances is close there. So we're seeing about $85 million in total sales.
Wow.
Right. And I think that number will grow if a few catalysts occur, which we can talk about that are super important.
So for those that don't know, when you look at reporting like on a weekly basis versus a monthly basis, like other states, are there pros and cons to that?
Yeah, I mean, it just makes it more complicated. I think this is just a legacy of what Ohio has done historically. So like the official Ohio sales report, they give you numbers by the week, right? So that these figures that we're talking about, the 87 million figure, that was just through September 28th, right? But then a new week started. So it didn't include those other 2 days. So I think they'll clean that up at some point and have a clear way of reporting. Like Michigan does a good job of doing it on a monthly basis and then breaking out recreational and medical. So sometimes people don't misinterpret the numbers. So I think that'll come, but right now it's just a little wonky to
I think what got me by surprise last month was that when it went live, Ohio, Michigan reported their biggest revenue sales ever at $294 million, which really surprised me to say the least. But, pricing is actually very aggressive in Michigan right now. It's favorable for a lot of consumers. But do you think, a $3 billion market that, forecasting and looking that out, that's around 3.6 billion. Ohio's supposed to be a $3 billion market. But how fast do you think it'll take for Ohio? Like we go from 44 to 87. Do you think we eclipse 200 million, in the next 6 months when you look at monthly sales?
I think it'll take a couple of years for Ohio to reach its full potential. And here are the things that need to happen, right? And I think some of them are going to happen in the next few months, and some of them are going to play out over 18 months, right? So the most important thing is that the product limits need to change. And, folks may know that on September 7th, they were supposed to open this up to adult use products. You were supposed to be able to sell pre-rolls, right? You were supposed to be able to buy 8ths and not 10ths. That still hasn't happened yet. That should happen. There's been a delay there, and that's actually going to be one of the things we're talking about on the panel. So that's one thing that needs to happen. You need to be able to buy regular adult use products like pre-rolls, which are a big driver of sales. And then, a few more things that need to happen. Pricing needs to come down a little bit so that Ohio is more competitive with Michigan. And, there's 120 stores open today, but by the end of next year, there'll be about 250. And so that retail density is also important. Last thing I'll say, I know this is a bunch of stuff, but I think these are the 3 or 4 key factors, is the advertising rules in Ohio right now are really restrictive, and those will be over time. So I think it's a slow 2-year climb from 1 billion today to 3 billion, in the year 2026. That's the way I would describe it.
Something that we talked about in our live stream on Wednesday was that we don't talk enough about the private side of the business and how a lot of mergers and acquisitions are going to start to happen within the next 12 to 18 months. I'm sure there's a lot of pubco companies that probably look at this market and probably wish they bought some assets a little bit sooner than what they did. But these valuations are only going to increase rapidly when you look at some of these numbers, don't you think?
Totally. Yeah. I think we will see a lot of that M&A. And here at the conference, there's a bunch of really, impressive private, smaller regional operators that could be an addition to future footprints for sure.
Yeah. Our good friend Jesse Chan is actually logging in here today. Advertising rules will make a big change. Absolutely. That's for sure. But, I was there on August 6th, then opening day, and the turnout was incredible. But yeah, there was a lot of regulators that were just, attending a lot of these dispensaries. People were working in line, but it's closely monitored and watched right now. But, I think people to really understand that full rec, once it gets going, you talked about how pre-rolls and stuff like that aren't available and how they're being delayed. Maybe explain to our audience as to why that's happening. Why is that?
Yeah, so there's a rulemaking agency called JCAR in Ohio, and I think that's worth paying attention to. That's JCARR. I forget the acronym that it sort of stands for. And it's headed by this guy, or one of the guys on the committee is Jamie Callender, who's a big cannabis advocate. Basically, that's the committee you want to be paying attention to over the next 6 to 12 months as they issue a lot of rules that govern how the adult use market is going to operate. So the statute said by September 7th, they were supposed to move to those new product limits. For whatever reasons, they have proposed rules, but they haven't finalized them yet. So hopefully in the next month or two, they'll finalize those rules. Hopefully a few months from now, we will see them issue advertising rules that will be more permissive and allow conventional advertising. I'm optimistic. I think they've rolled out this program in a really controlled way, and then over time, they're gonna loosen the limits. And I would also say,
what
look,
would you like to see then, as far as some of the rules that are advertising rules that are implemented?
yeah, I think the advertising rules are a response to Michigan, right? And Ohio and Michigan kind of have this rivalry going on. And in Michigan, which is an awesome market, you see tons of stores everywhere, and you see an infinite number of cannabis billboards. I think Ohio wanted to roll out its program in a more controlled way. They've done so by being really restrictive right now. But I envision, over time, you'll be able to advertise more freely. Billboards will be allowed. So those are kind of some of the changes. And look, I think you guys have reported on the kind of obscene fines that some of the operators incurred for, pretty minor advertising violations on the first day of adult use. So they're being pretty strict right now, but hopefully that will be mitigated over time. And just the other thing that I'll say is, we're talking about the sales numbers. I continue to believe that just as important about Ohio is the way that it'll impact other red and purple states. It's neighboring states and the way it's changed the cannabis conversation there and across the country. So I think it's both a boost for growth, but symbolically in this cultural conversation we're having on cannabis, it's immensely, immensely important. And that's why it's exciting to be here.
So you're leaving Cleveland and taking the Amtrak train ride over to Chicago for the big conference next week. Does that train ride take you through Michigan? Because if it does, I've taken I-94 west from Detroit to Chicago for this conference before, and I think I probably counted about, I'm not kidding you, at least over 50, maybe 75 billboards of cannabis advertising during that stretch. Like, there's a lot of advertising that goes on in that state, that's for sure.
Totally. I don't think it goes through Michigan, but I'm excited. A bunch of us who are at the conference here in Ohio are also going to be at Benzinga.
Nice.
And we could have flied, but we decided to take the Amtrak because that's going to be awesome. And we're going to go through northern Ohio, northern Indiana, go through South Bend. So it should be beautiful, and excited to see you guys in Chicago.
Are you guys in Cleveland for the weekend?
Through Sunday. Yeah, the conference goes and through Saturday night, and on Sunday we take the train. So.
Sounds like I should get in my vehicle and head up and check out the old Rock and Roll Hall of Fame tonight. That sounds like a blast.
It'll be a great event. I'll send you the details right after we get off. And, I'm telling you, people here are really excited. There is a sense of liberation when it comes to cannabis here. And there are people from all of these neighboring states like Kentucky, like Indiana, like West Virginia, like Pennsylvania. I mean, just as we're talking about neighboring states, it's no accident that Emily Kincaid, who's a representative from Pennsylvania that is from Pittsburgh, is now suddenly emerged as one of the biggest advocates for cannabis legalization there, because everybody from Pittsburgh is driving into Youngstown, those other areas to buy their cannabis. So you see the cultural reverberations here in Appalachia and the Midwest.
Yeah. Well, when you see neighboring states, the amount of tax revenue that's being produced, you can't help but say, you know what, this is something that we got to move and move fast. But Ohio's got to be a great, example of why we should do this, because I think, let's face it, the industry, the story has evolved. Michigan went live back in 2019. You can't really compare what their first months were compared to Ohio because of how much the industry has developed. But it's a real example, as you don't need a lot of runway time to go live to see reap the benefits of like how much revenue and sales can be generated in such a short period of time. But hopefully, obviously, with Pennsylvania, they get something passed. I know we keep hearing stuff, hopefully by the end of the year or beginning of 2025, but huge market opportunity, obviously, in Pennsylvania if that were to happen. Guap, did you want to ask something real quick?
Yeah, I had a good laugh when I saw that you guys took a few of my questions, but I had a good laugh when I saw the tents and the lack of pre-rolls. So obviously there's some growth that can happen pretty quickly. But yeah, I mean, I've heard Hirsh talk about the red wave theory, and I totally am on board with that because I live in a prohibitionist state of North Carolina. And, beyond just like pressuring the state next to you or near you, or if you're a GOP controlled state to pass something, I think what I'm really excited about with Ohio, and I think Hirsh would agree with me on this, is we've had so many examples of states that have rolled things out poorly, let's say, or we would have rolled it out differently. And so anytime a state comes online like an Ohio, we get a little excited because like this could be the one where they actually get it right and learn from the mistakes of past sort of rollouts. Is that how you're feeling about Ohio? Like, I would love Florida when they go, if and when, and we're going to talk about Florida in Amendment 3, if and when that passes, that the legislature looks at Ohio or a state like Ohio for an example of how to do it right in a red state. Is that kind of part of your thesis as well?
Yeah, Guap, I mean, I think you said it well. I agree with everything that you just said. It doesn't get any more all-American than Ohio. Right? That's why it's so important. From a Republican standpoint, no Republican has ever won the White House without winning Ohio. That's why it's so consequential. And yeah, I hope that Florida looks to it as well. And I think a year from now, if we're talking, some of the most successful adult use states will be Republican states. I think a year from now, we'll be saying the most successful cannabis markets in the country are Ohio and Florida, but also small states like Montana and Alaska, which are Republican and are small, so are ignored. But when it comes to a per capita sales metric, they're amongst, the most successful out there. And I think that will really change our conversation in DC.
Yeah. Gotta love the people from Montana and Tester and Danes and the support that they have for the industry. Good group of guys over there that are very supportive for it. But that's interesting that you think, well, let's face it, the closest states that are looking at adult use right now are predominantly, let's just face it, Florida, you'd mentioned, Montana. And yeah, interesting to see how it'll unfold. But let's now move into topic number 2. And I know this is a hot topic pertaining to Florida, and we want to be very careful with how we approach this and play some Switzerland going on right now. But it involves the lawsuit pertaining to Trulieve, defamation lawsuit that they filed against the Republican Party of Florida in 2 media outlets over what its claims are and false misleading advertisements regarding cannabis legalization amendment proposal as I should say it is backing, which is Amendment 3. So hot topic to say the least, Hirsh. And when I look at this, I don't even really know where to begin because, on one side, there's a lot of misinformation that's being spread by the Republican Party pertaining to this right now. On the other side, you could probably ask the question to say, should we be ruffling the feathers? Should we be allocating a lot of the marketing dollars that were raised towards the Yes on 3 campaign towards a counter marketing strategy? Not to say that there's not any marketing strategy going on right now, but it's, again, I want to be careful with what I say because I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. But this obviously is a topic or a lawsuit that grabbed my attention, everybody in the industry earlier this week.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, without getting into all of the back and forth, I think I'll just make 2 really simple points. The first point is about margin of victory, right? So I'm speaking to you today from Ohio. Before Ohio passed and shortly after it passed, there was some concern that the GOP in Ohio might intervene and block the initiative. One of the reasons they were unable to do so is Ohio passed with 57% of the vote. In other words, if Ohio passed with 51% of the vote, they would have had sort of the political standing to try to intervene here. So that's just a way of saying the margin of victory in Florida matters. And I think all of us, regardless of how we're positioned here, our focus over the next month should be making that margin of victory as high as possible.
Yes.
That prevents, the GOP in Florida from having that political capital. So without getting into the back and forth between various parties here, that should be our unifying focus, like running up the score, because that makes it politically more difficult, right? If you win 65-35, it's a lot harder to monkey with the initiative. The second, again, very factual point I will make is that this depends on the GOP having a supermajority. We are about to go into an election.
Yes.
The GOP has that supermajority because Ron DeSantis kicked ass in 2022, which Republicans can do during off-cycle elections. So without getting into people's politics, if the Democrats perform better than average in this cycle, and this is the first cycle in modern history where they're contesting every legislative seat, then the ability to intervene in this initiative is mitigated. So there's a lot of carping back and forth. I think those are the 2 things to focus on to protect the gains that we seek to make this November.
Do you think the Democrats will perform well?
Again, without this is a totally apolitical comment, right? But I will say that, people think of Florida as a red state.
Yep.
But in presidential elections, Democrats are often quite competitive, right? When Trump beat Clinton in Florida in 2016, it was 49-48, right? Even in 2020, he won by 3 points. And, a Democrat has won the presidential election in 2 of the past 4 elections. So all I'm saying is, the Democrats, they won't probably win Florida at a presidential level, but turnout will be really high by virtue of these ballot initiatives. And so they see this as an opportunity to pare back the GOP supermajority there. So yes, as an apolitical comment, I think they will do better than they normally do.
Yeah, well, we're going to find out in 5 weeks, that's for sure. Did you get a chance to see the content we produced last week or 2 weeks ago when we were in Washington?
Totally. I watched it all. It was fascinating.
Yeah,
sure.
I think Senator Warren wanted to tackle me at one point when I was kind of pushing back for a couple times. But the reality is like, look, I know there's some people pushing back. Like we're nonpartisan, but what we're understanding correctly is that Senate Majority Leader, he is the Senate Majority Leader, Chuck Schumer. He is the one responsible right now if he wants to give this a floor vote. Clearly, we understand there's going to be a new administration that's going to take place. And within the first 100 days, cannabis is not going to be anywhere in that conversation. But if you were to see, I think the only chance and the reason why I keep bringing this up, if the Republicans were basically to control both the House and the Senate during lame duck session, do you think there's any chance that we could see SAFE brought into a floor vote at that point?
I think lame duck politics are really, really hard to predict, right? So let's just imagine that the Democrats, won a trifecta, for example, right? Then they could say, hey, we're not doing anything on SAFE because we're going to do our thing in 2025, right? Let's say the Republicans won a trifecta. They would say, hey, Mike Johnson, just like sit on this right now because we want to do our own thing in 2025.
Right.
So I think it's incredibly difficult to predict.
Yeah.
What I'll just say is if the Republicans win the Senate, the guy who we want to be the Senate Majority Leader is Steve Daines, right? So if the Republicans win the Senate, there's some concern about what might happen there. Steve Daines is the guy we want in that seat, not
100%.
Rick Scott, not John Thune, not John Cornyn. So that's something to pay attention to.
That's a great angle. What'd you think of presidential candidate Kamala Harris and her comments on the podcast earlier this week?
First of all, that's one of my favorite podcasts, All the Smoke.
Isn't it amazing?
It's such an incredible podcast if you're a basketball fan, or even if it's called All the Smoke if you're a fan of cannabis. So anyone who watches the NBA, I recommend it. Matt Barnes is my spirit animal. I mean, he's really cool.
I love Steven Jackson too. Man, that guy has he has gone out and basically reset his whole image life. Guys, I know there was the whole Malice of Palace type brawl, but it's just I almost forget that he was part of that. But he's done an incredible job. They both have. But anyways, continue your thought.
Totally. Yeah. I'm from the Bay Area. So the 07 Warriors, we believe are very special. My thoughts on her comments, I continue to be disappointed. I mean, it was encouraging that she stated her desire to legalize cannabis. I continue to believe it is a misstep the way that she is slow playing this issue. This issue is overwhelmingly supported in her party as a matter of intellectual consistency. If you're just going to continue to say nobody should be in jail for, smoking weed, that requires you to take a leadership position on this issue and not defer it to the states. And I think there's immense political upside in doing so. So look, she knew enough that she had to cover some ground and state her position there, but she did so in such a basic way that I found it unsatisfying. So, and look, I'm from California. She's always been a cautious politician, right? And again, whether you support her or not, she neglected to support adult use in 2010 when it was on the ballot, and even in 2016 when it was on the ballot, and it passed by 15 points. And she was running for a non-competitive U.S. Senate seat. So I think her caution on this issue is misguided, and that's a habit that needs to be corrected.
So if she's trying to win votes over, maybe it's probably some Republicans that are flipping over. Do you think this is why, in some ways, up until now, she's kind of hit the pause button on this right now? And if so, do you believe if she's elected, then this is just a pause and we'll see progress being made?
I think that may be the reasoning, but I don't think that's sound reasoning, right? This is such a broadly bipartisan issue. You're not going to alienate Republicans by taking a stance on this issue. I think politicians get into habits, right? And a lot of times they stick with those habits, even if they're not appropriate for the current circumstance. Ron DeSantis has a habit of fighting the left. He's not smart enough to understand that the battle he's chosen this time is misguided. Sherrod Brown tries to stand up for workers and is anti-corporation, and that's why he's been skeptical of cannabis. But this is the biggest job creation engine that Ohio is going to see. So I think it's misguided. And I'll also just say, right, the presence of cannabis is changing the political dynamics in this race. Now, what I mean by that is in Florida, well, yeah, and in a very specific way, not in the way that people normally suggest, but in Florida, right, Donald Trump is going to have to spend some money that he didn't think he was going to have to spend because it's a somewhat competitive race now. And that's in part because cannabis and abortion are on the ballot, right? And so the presence of those ballot initiatives means that that candidate has to spend money there that he would rather be spending in Wisconsin. So that just shows you how impactful these issues can be.
Well, it's a good thing. All we want is just a seat at the table to have a conversation, right?
Yep.
That's for sure. Well, this has been great. I I will actually mention, somebody actually commented about, we talked about the states of Montana and Florida. Don't sleep on Delaware. Have you had much followed the state itself and what the potential opportunity presents pertaining to it?
I have been following Delaware. The rollout continues to be delayed. I think the operators that are there, mostly MSOs, will do well because it's such a limited licensed state. It does border a number of states that already have cannabis. So I don't know, maybe I'm not paying enough attention to Delaware. I try to pay attention to all states. But it'll be great when it comes online. It's a small population too. So but yeah, it'll be great when it opens.
Well, listen, enjoy your time at the Hall of Fame tonight. That sounds like a blast. Send me the details because door to door, it's about 2.5 hours from my place. So maybe it's something worth checking out. Plus, I'm a Tigers fan. They play game 1 tomorrow. So that'll be a good day in Cleveland for sure. But listen, I appreciate you checking in and look forward to seeing you next week at the Benzinga Conference.
Chicago. It'll be fun.
Chicago, here we come. And on that note, let's segue now into our next segment, and we're going to bring up Elliot Lane, who is now from Benzinga. Take care, Hirsh.
Thanks, Hirsh.
But good to see you, Mr. Elliot Lane. We're going to bring him up, Arns, right now. There we go.
Hello, hello.
Do you guys know each other, Hirsh and
Elliot?
Elliot?
Yeah, I know Hirsh.
Oh,
how's it going, man? Good to see you. Hirsh is speaking at our California event.
Oh,
November 12th. Nice. He's going to be up there with Seth Yakatan talking California.
We had Seth on Wednesday, but smart guy to say the least. 36,000 followers on LinkedIn, and I checked out some of his metrics, and he's getting about, I think, between 500 and 1,000 likes and 200-300 comments. So he knows how to work LinkedIn. He's trying to figure out, obviously, how to monetize it, but regardless, he's got an audience and a smart guy to say the least. But anyway, wanted to ask you that, we got a big event coming up next week in Chicago, and I know, probably arguably the best event you guys have ever had last spring, which was in Hollywood, Florida. But for investors that can't make it, they can obviously stream online. But what would you say, what are some of the big takeaways that people can really anticipate and look forward to for next week's conference, Elliot?
Well, my first takeaway from this conversation is just imagining Senator Warren tackling you. That truly made my day, I think.
I got lit up pretty big, and I was just like, oh, ruffled some feathers. But hey, why not? Got to keep the conversation going, right?
Yeah, I know. Also, loving the hat, Guap. Loving the hat. I got to represent. But yeah, the next week's conference is going to be, I think, a good indicator of what people are looking at in 2025. Right? I think people understand the year that we've had so far. People understand the last 2 years that we've had so far in cannabis, right? You can't pull wool over people's eyes anymore for that, but when it comes to what's next, and how people can look at the December 2nd hearing, how people can look at these political updates that you and Hirsh have been talking about, right? These are things that, how does that affect your business in 2025? And how does that affect investors who look at these businesses in 2025? And those are the conversations I expect to happen. We had a lot of money move in Florida. A lot of money changed hands. A lot of financings took place. M&A conversations were furthered. Brands were licensed. A lot of business was done. I think what we're doing, what we're going to see in Chicago, you'll see more of that. But I think you're going to see a lot more early 2025 news come from some of these discussions. And I think you're going to see people wait for further investments until they can get the most value out of them.
Do you think you're seeing more, as far as institutional presence, when you had to compare, let's say, the Chicago show last fall compared to where we are going to be this year? How would you compare the two? Are you seeing more interest pertaining to this year's event? Or I don't want to say there wasn't any last year, but there was. But is it increasing, knowing with some of the dialogue that's happened out of Washington the last few months?
Well, don't forget what happened in Chicago last year.
Yeah, that's true.
I think we had 95% of our registrants show up to last Chicago because of two reasons. The leak happened right before our event.
You're right.
And then Senate Banking Committee passed SAFER
You're right.
during our event.
You're right.
I actually remember attending that conference. I was sitting there at one of the tables during the keynote. I saw the tweet, and I actually walked up to Elliot and whispered, "It just passed the committee. If you want to get on stage and be the one to break that news, you'll get a huge applause." And you didn't do it.
Well, I had C-suites that were wanting to do that. I had Ed Perlmutter and Corey Gardner that were wanting to do
Yeah,
that.
he was.
Right.
Yeah.
I had Safira Galoob from NCR who was wanting to do that. Right. They wanted to watch. I had to reshuffle the agenda last minute because people wanted to watch the hearing so that they could then go on stage and talk about it. Right. And of course we did it because it needed to be done. Right. We needed to have the regulatory analysis of that hearing. Right. So, I think last year's event was very important, but I think it was important for setting up this year's event in a weirdly selfish way. Right.
Well,
now, sorry, go ahead.
There's always moving parts. So you want to start a conference out with a bang. So who's leading off with your panel and what's the topic of conversation? Do you know?
So excited. Yeah. So we're starting, our opening keynote is Ross Gerber.
Okay.
Right. If you're not familiar, he is, multi-billionaire wealth manager, with Gerber Kawasaki, very outspoken. He is not going to hold back. I think you'll either enjoy him or you won't.
Yeah.
I think you'll have opinions walking away from that keynote, but that's what keynotes should do. They should spark thought. They should spark education. They should spark, your conversations leading throughout the event. And we have, I think, one of the most potentially significant investors starting off our event.
It's great.
So I'm very excited to have him there. Prior to him, though, at 8 and then 8:45 respectively, we have two capital markets presentations. So we're going to have Scott Greiper present arguably the best capital markets data out there with Viridian Capital Advisors. And then at 8:45, we're going to have someone named Bo Whitney try and top him with a presentation on his recent report with C-Trust, right?
Great guy.
So there's a lot to learn right away. We'll have, I think when you look at our agenda, we're targeting two particular forms of education at this event. You're gonna have a lot of investor-centric education, a lot of capital markets-driven insights, how companies can utilize 280 or maybe if rescheduling goes past, right? How companies can adjust what they need to do immediately, right? Because the government isn't just going to let you have more money, right?
Yeah.
How can you go and take advantage of that? But beyond that, we're also going to have retail-centric discussions, at a plethora this event. So we're going to talk about loyalty. We're going to talk about consumer trends. We're going to talk about, does cultivation drive retail or vice versa, and how product quality plays into the efficiency of retail, right? There's a lot that goes into the operations of these businesses that affects or should affect what investors think of these respective companies.
Yeah. It's amazing what you guys have done. You put on the best events, obviously, for the entire industry, which is incredible. But it's pretty remarkable when you think of the chairman, Jason Raznick. What year did he start this? Was it 2010?
Yeah, I think we're going on 14 years. So that sounds about right.
But I remember talking to him. He said one of his first investors was Detroit businessman, billionaire Dan Gilbert, who also owns the Cleveland Cavaliers, Quicken Loans, Rock Financial, like very, very well known. Had some outspoken responses to LeBron going to Miami, I remember back in the day, but rightfully so. But regardless, you guys it's just incredible what you guys have grown. And I think what's important for our viewers to really understand is the network of people that will be speaking all within a 48-hour window. So, for tickets to buy or to attend, where can they find a lot of the information right now?
Super easy. That's a bzcannabis.com. bzcannabis.com.
All right. And then as well, this is going to be streaming online if they can't make it. Yes.
Yes, it will be streaming. It's all on that page. We will collect your email and we will spam you. But all that said, it's worth it, right? The education will be worth it. If you can make it, the networking, is second to none. And there's no reason to do an event if there's no value to the attendee, right? Yeah. And I really do think that the value here is in the other attendees at our events. I do agree with you. The agenda, the content is our backbone, right? We're a content engine at heart, being who we are at Benzinga. But the reason you go to events is to expand your network and to do business, right? So I think all that other stuff, it's really a fluffy benefit of events, if you will. But you're going to
talk about fluffy benefits. When you had that spring event, the Fountain Blue, that was pretty fluffy and fun.
I'll give a personal endorsement for Benzinga because I was just a guy on Twitter who didn't even show his face for a couple years, and the first event I sort of got the courage to go-to was Benzinga, and one of the first people I ran into was Elliot in the hall, and he made me feel, really special and welcome, and connected me with people. So I ended up having, going to a lot of the presentations and learning a lot, but also just how I ended up paying for the VIP room. So suddenly I was sitting in a sort of room with a tie-dye shirt on, having a surreal experience of seeing all these profile pictures of Twitter people around me, like, oh wow, there's Boris, like right there. Nancy Mace just walked in. All these CEOs. I had a really good conversation with Jason Wild where he gave me the time of day, and I ended up getting a lot of people's phone numbers and connecting with them after the conference, and having 30 minutes sort of like, where could I fit into the cannabis landscape kind of conversations. And now look, I'm on TDR right now on a Friday. So for me, it was just personally really important to go to these, to go to the Benzinga show. So if you're out there and you've got you own one dispensary, or you're out there and you're an investor with a family office and you think I'm sort of like, I'm too small, I'm insignificant, think twice about that. And I would encourage you to go there and just be open and talk to people, because it's a really small community. And so to me, it felt like like connecting with people, like, not, I don't want to say shooting fish in a barrel, but like, it was a very small barrel and a lot of big fish in my mind. And so and they're so accessible, right? If you're there, you're kind of like, you're already in. And so they expect, like, you're sort of like in the sector already. So for me, it was super valuable. I really enjoyed it. And that's why I've gone back.
Why am I drawing a blank? Who'd you have 2 years ago? Why am I drawing a blank? Steve Urkel, the celebrity. Why am I drawing the character from the what's his name? The celebrity.
We did have him. Oh my God. I had forgotten.
You had him at the event. I would say probably my greatest Benzinga story. Well, we're at Jason Wild's place down in Miami there a couple years ago. But Ric Flair and Mike Tyson came in, and that was like a hurricane that took over. You were there.
Yeah. Well, do you? What was it? It wasn't this Miami. It was the last Miami. So it was 2023 Miami. I randomly see Chuck Liddell walking around.
I was going to bring up my.
And I was like,
Chuck Liddell. Yeah.
Did I just see Chuck Liddell at my event? How did I not know Chuck Liddell, the damn Iceman, excuse my language, the Iceman was coming to my event?
I know.
Did he use a fake email? What just happened?
I approached him at the bar downstairs, and I was just like, hey, Chuck. And I showed him a little demo when I used to ring announce MMA. So he gave me the time of day. But I wanted to see what his reach was like. So I stood up to him, and he put his fist on my forehead. And I'm not kidding you. It had to have been about 1.5 foot difference. Like, I'm like, this guy is so long, his arms, and massive. And I'm like, this guy could literally kill me in about 3 seconds, but
that is his specialty. That we do cannabis events. He does killing.
Yeah,
but
my Benzinga story was, I thought it was breaking news, right? Tyson assaulted someone on a plane. I was like, oh shit, I don't think he's showing up for the talk. And so I ran over, because I got no shame in my game. I went right up to Tim Seymour. He had no idea who I was. And I showed him, and I was like, look, I don't think Tyson's showing up. I tried to break news. I came up to him. I said, Mike Tyson assaults someone on a plane, and I don't think he's showing up. And he goes, and he like finished my sentence, did the headline, and said, never try to break news to a newsman.
That is so.
And then that was it. Like, I don't think we talked since. It was just like the funniest. Everywhere you look, I hung out with Dress Wedding the whole for like a few hours. Legendary a legend out of California. So there's a wide range of people there for sure.
Dress is good people. Really.
Yeah, I like him.
Any politicians that you have coming or no?
We're mainly featuring Ed Perlmutter. I think really it's campaign season, right?
Yeah.
So Dave Joyce was confirmed. But he can no longer be there, I think, due to hosting some campaign functions in Ohio.
Yeah.
Same thing with Cory Gardner. He is hosting a presidential campaign fundraiser.
Wow.
In Colorado. He will be there actually Sunday night and Monday morning, but he has to leave before he was scheduled to speak. So if you want to network with Cory Gardner, get there early. He'll be there. And I do think I'll say this, right? we don't have politicians just to have politicians, right? I think if we really wanted, if an event can get a politician there, they will, right? But Dave Joyce is one of the most influential voices in cannabis.
Huge co-sponsor, say banking. That's the guy you want, right?
Yeah. Same with Troy Carter out of Louisiana. The people we have are close to, if not leading caucuses, right? They are right under the Speaker of the House, right? They're the people who affect these things, right?
Yes.
So and Ed Perlmutter and Cory Gardner are as equally influenceable, even though they're not in the Congress anymore, but they are still having conversations on behalf of the cannabis industry, right? So, I think for us, it's always about the education we can provide. But one thing we are focusing on politically is getting our audience involved, right? I think one thing we're seeing across all the lobbying organizations, we'll have all of them there attached, USCC and NCR. They're joining forces at our event to basically say the industry needs to do more. Right. We need the industry more involved. We need the industry calling Congress people. So we're going to have QR codes all around our event. Basically, you scan it. It's going to take you immediately to a call center where you tell them essentially like your zip code where you live, and it'll patch you through.
That's smart.
To your congressperson. It'll preface you on what to say prior to that. So it's really not that big of a deal. Right. But we want our audience to get involved, and we want them to take it back to their communities. Right. So it's just one of the things that we are trying to do politically for the industry is make it super easy for everybody in attendance and everybody that knows somebody in attendance, and even beyond that, to basically just at least one small participation. Even if you can't do something financially, you can still call your congressperson. You can still write to your congressperson. And I think I heard from the lobbyists themselves, a call is worth 100 emails.
No kidding.
Right. So that's why it's to a call. So
that is a great approach. Okay, so this is being held at the Marriott on Magnificent Mile on Tuesday and Wednesday of next week, correct?
Yeah, correct. We will start with an opening reception on the 7th on Monday.
Oh, you will. Okay.
Yeah, and then we'll have content 8 to 5:30 on Tuesday, and then it'll be 8:15 to 4, ending with good old Jim Belushi on Wednesday.
Nice.
Yeah, so it'll be fun.
That's awesome.
And then we're actually hosting our first ever after party that is consumption friendly. So we'll get to experience some of this Illinois product.
Finally.
So I'm very excited for that. We're doing it in partnership with the Beard Bros and Good Life Gang. I think two very respected organizations in the cannabis space. They host these parties all the time, right? So we're leaning on them, and it's going to be a fun time.
Well, I am driving down to Lincoln, which is 3.5 hours south of Chicago, to do some stuff with Cresco on Wednesday. And I didn't book my hotel because I was planning on driving back up to Chicago. And actually, I was going to stay in Juliet, which is an hour south of Chicago. That's another facility of Cresco. But I didn't book my hotel yet on the Wednesday night. So I think I might drive back to the city and check out that event on Wednesday evening. It sounds like fun. But regardless, again, just a quick reminder, bzcannabis.com is where people can buy tickets, and to stream online, they can go where again?
bzcannabis.com. And it's at the top bar. Click it. We'll grab your email. Yes, Christopher Brady. Brady? I don't know. Brady. I'm going to say both. We will send you an email or two. So all that said, bzcannabis.com for tickets, for speakers, for watching the content, and for stay up to date with that site, because we're launching an exciting iteration of this event in Q2 of next year as well. Okay. And you're gonna see some cool, I'm really excited for some cool changes that we're adding to it.
Time changes everything, but I love the QR code approach. That is great to get back and get people more and more engaged, because I even said to people, it's just like, look, if I can get on a plane and fly to Washington and just walk around the public building, and there was one actually dispense owner from New Jersey. It was on a couple of weeks ago, and she made the effort to go. She ran into Cory Booker in the hallways, talked to him for maybe 15-20 seconds. And just so happens 5 days later, she finally got her license for just make the effort. You don't even have to go to Washington. Just make the calls. If you're involved in
Cory,
space, right?
That's interesting.
Yeah, I've heard some rumors that he's definitely getting some pressure from obviously his constituents from the state of New Jersey. Let's face it, they got a pretty enhanced cannabis program. I am hearing that, no surprise here, that
people showed out for our New Jersey event. It was exciting. Yeah. We had a packed room all day.
Yeah. Well, just to continue to push the ball forward. All right, my friend. Listen, we'll look forward to seeing you on Monday in Chicago. Okay.
Yeah, looking forward to it, gents. Have a great weekend. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we welcome all your feedback always.
All right.
If you want to hear from somebody, etc.
All right, tell Elliot, Luke, or I should say Patrick, your brother, and Luke and Jason that we say hi. Look forward to seeing all of them next week. Okay.
All right.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Elliot. Take care.
Appreciate it. Bye.
All right. One of the good guys, I will say, in the cannabis space, probably the nicest guy that y'all have come across. Humerman, do you know who the ALJ judge is and what his stance is towards cannabis? We do not yet. That has not been decided. But when we do know, log on and we'll give you your feedback. All right, this has been great.
A consumption-friendly event. I found the free drinks to be almost offensive at a cannabis conference. So
are you going? You gonna go? You gonna go?
I like that they're doing it. No, I'm not going. Not this time, but maybe next time. But yeah, if there was a consumption lounge event, that definitely sounds a lot more fun than free drinks and early 90s hip hop.
Early 90s hip hop. You can't go wrong with early 90s hip hop.
Yeah.
That's timeless music. But maybe I'm showing my age. Two quick topics I want to bring up before we head on out here today. I know the debate with Senator Joe Gruters with Dr. Jessica Spencer took place this week. You felt like he pretty much destroyed this debate. What are one or two things that really pointed out to you in that debate that you were happy with?
For sure. Check out what we tweeted out on the Dales Report Twitter account, because we linked right to it. It was everything that I hoped the Luke at Sam debated John Morgan Esquire. It was like just the AV was terrible. It was like streamed from way out. There was way too much sort of audience participation. I think John Morgan didn't come as prepped as he should have. It went on for a couple hours. It was really tough to watch. In stark contrast to what happened, this Fox channel hosted a debate between someone who's very involved in the No on 3 campaign versus Gruters. Gruters came prepped. The whole thing was 30 minutes. The topics were set ahead of time. It was sort of like, all right, let's talk about the smell. Gruters, you have the first minute. Doctor, you have another minute. Response. Next topic. It was like everything you want a debate to be, it turned out to be. So I highly recommend everyone check that out, because Gruters dismantled everything.
He came prepared, didn't he?
Yeah, it's so weird to see.
I think the greatest thing, kind of like what basically Hirsh was saying too.
Yeah.
People walk into a room, wow, this is really professional. Or, for example, it's just like, you want to go in a debate. It's just like, I've been waiting decades for this debate. Let's have the conversation. Right. And I think that's where, and this would be curious to see how this ALJ hearing will go in December, because there's so much compelling data. And
it's odd to see. It's just unlikely allies, right? You've got some, prohibitionists getting together with some hemp business owners, and they are throwing everything at this Amendment 3 campaign. I mean, I tweeted out, like, I think you're winning, or I think you're doing something right when their last argument is the smell. Or, it must be nice to like win a debate when you're not concerned with facts.
I wish I would have followed up when I spoke to Congressman Byron Donalds. He brought up the smell.
Right.
And he had to run into an elevator, but I so wanted to wait, one last thing. But
no, I did. I snuck in the, hey, check out the sidecar amendment or bill by Gruters about the smell. And it's just, so Gruters was ready. He was just like, it's a single issue amendment. Then it goes to the legislature and we implement things. So things like marketing restrictions, public consumptions, home grow, those things will be implemented. The idea, the monopoly thing, there's 20 plus businesses with, yes, Trulieve has a lot of the licenses. Welcome to capitalism. Right. So it's sort of like, it's,
you got cut off. You got cut off there for a second.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying, Gruters handles the monopoly comment very well. And talks about like how many companies make phones, and sort of gets into the, the idea that this is big bad cannabis.
It's so far from the truth. So far from the truth.
It's just kind of we're checking out for sure. It was very, very satisfying to use Hirsch's words.
Look, it's great, obviously, to say the least. And again, it's going to take time, but at least we have these conversations. And whenever you get the opportunity, just make sure you're ready, which Senator Gruters basically alluded to. But one thing I really grabbed my attention here in today's podcast is that if Kamala does win, does she appoint Senator Steve Daines as the Speaker of the House? Like that would be pretty incredible, to say the least. But listen, we can get into that stuff later. We're running around 51 minutes now. But let's get to the last topic, which is this is an interesting one as we roll into our last topic. No pun intended. But get this. The National Institute on Drug Abuse, otherwise known as the NIDA, is looking for contractors capable of rolling joints. This is interesting, to say the least. What is the scoop on this? I got a chance to quickly glance at this title, but I don't know much about the story.
Yeah, it's not a huge story. It was more of a sort of mic drop, guap funny story that I wanted to cover on a Friday because it's amusing. It sounds like the least cool joint rolling position I've ever seen advertised. I've seen other like people in the hip hop community look for personal rollers. That sounded very appealing. I definitely took some pictures and sent in my application to those. This sounds horrible, like a federal agency looking for someone, or someone with a machine.
I was going to say, did they not? There is automation that's involved here, and there are machines that make this sort of thing. But hey, welcome! It's 2024.
Fill some cones. Yeah, it's definitely possible. And the other part was quality control, which I just laughed at the idea of, some miserable person rolling joints in a white room and then and making sure they are A-okay for them.
What's that say though? What's that say though? That they're looking for joint rollers, like for a, an agency like this. I find it interesting.
I'm not going to read too much into it and say, well, this means that Schedule 3 is a sure thing or anything like that. It's just.
But the National Institute on Drug Abuse is looking for contractors capable of rolling joints. Get your rescheduling documents ready to go. This is coming. Sounds like a trap to me, writes Henry Lopez. You think so?
Yeah, that's right. Don't apply is my recommendation. That's right.
All right, this has been a great interview, or I should say podcast as well. But Hirsh obviously providing some great insight and feedback. Always a treat having you on as well. And then great event coming up next week. And I know, for some people that can't attend, it's worth definitely streaming online at bzcannabis.com. Benzinga puts on the best events in the entire space. And anytime that you can get all the major thinking heads in one room, it's just like trade deadline. You get all the GMs basically in a room, and it's a hot topic, to say the least.
Yeah.
But make sure, if you can't make it, to stream online as well. Lots to learn, that's for sure. Lots of great data that's going to be coming out. We will be there. As far as next week's scheduling, going to be a little bit of a wonky one just because we're going to be traveling, but we're going to do a live stream, probably not on Monday, but put this in your calendars. Monday, or I should say Tuesday, 4 o'clock Eastern time, we're going to do a live stream at the event. And then we're probably going to get some content filmed that'll be pre-recorded that we'll push out next Wednesday at 4 o'clock from the Benzinga conference. And then we'll be back here for our live stream as usual on the Friday, just because Anthony and I are going to be traveling, as I've got a project to do with Cresco. And then as well, Anthony is going to be networking at the actual event in Chicago. But listen, my friend, enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thanks for checking in, and we'll see you back here next week.
For sure. Take care, everyone.
Take care.
Take care, everyone. Stay up.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching our latest podcast. Lots of momentum building. You guys getting all excited? Leave comments below. Again, we want to take this viral. Smash that like button and make sure to click on that bell for all notifications as we start to bring on bigger and bigger guests. Don't forget to subscribe to our daily newsletter, the Baked In newsletter, by logging on to thedalesreport.com. And we want to take this viral, as I said, and make this community grow. So make sure to subscribe on that channel because we wouldn't be here without you. Thanks again, everyone, for watching.